People who watch security cameras for a living, what creepy things have you tried to forget? Worked as a harbour master a while ago. Had to check the marina's cameras after a boat was abandoned at our docks. I was looking for the owner. I looked on the tape from the boat's first night in the marina. The man who had sailed the boat in was standing on the end of his boat for 2 hours, barely moving. Then, at 1:30 a.m., he just walked off the back and dropped into the water. He never came back up, never found his body. Freaky. Oh no, these are going to be terrible, aren't they? Oh, I just got a shiver through my spine. It's almost like you were watching the guy's thought. You know, those 2 hours before he jumped in, it's like you were watching him come to the decision that he's going to jump off. Ugh. I used to do IT support for a charity that supplied housing and support for homeless people. A large proportion also had mental health issues, so there were a fair amount of interesting events that happened. Being in IT, I avoided experiencing most of it firsthand, though I was threatened with being stabbed on about my 3rd day. Anyway, I come in one Monday, and there's an email labelled urgent, saying there was an incident at the stairwell of one of the properties on Sunday night, and could I pull the relevant CCTV footage and put it on DVD? I had to do this fairly frequently. I skip through the footage, find the incident, usually a fight or blatant drug dealing, and burn it to DVD for the police. The email never mentioned what the incident was, so I skip through the footage and watch as a clearly very agitated man ties a rope around a stair rail at the top of the stairs, then his neck, looks over the rail and then just casually tips forward over it. The rope flipped around him and he dangled there twitching for far too long, before he just stopped. So yeah, that was a fun Monday. Wasn't a security officer, but I worked at a 24/7 gas station for a while. One night my co-worker accidentally killed himself while at work, and I made the mistake of watching the footage. He went to the back of the store with a bag of drugs, probably cocaine, snorted it and started acting funny for about 10 minutes. He then sits back in the office and gets fidgety/thrashing around until finally he just goes limp in this chair. He died of a heart attack and sat there for 5 hours before anybody came in. Thought the absence of an employee was strange and called the cops. It was really weird seeing people come in and act all pooey for the lack of service. They'd just leave thinking someone was lazy. But nah, dude was dead. Saw a chicken walk up the side of a tree at 2 a.m. See, this is what I was expecting to hear more of, stories like seeing a chicken at 2 a.m. climbing up the side of a tree. Not these dark and deep stories. This is actually mad. Was watching CCTV footage of a parking deck, and on the 9th level, there's this guy sitting in the middle of the deck, banging his head on one of the pillars. All of a sudden, the guy just stops and runs to the edge. Without stopping or jumping, he flings himself over the edge. I immediately called dispatch and told them what had happened. A few days later, I was offered counselling for those events. I work in a retail store, and for a while, I worked security here. Watching the security cameras wasn't technically my job, but we were consistently short-handed in that department, and the manager was grooming me for promotion, so I got to fill in and watch the cameras occasionally. One day, when we were reviewing footage from overnight, we saw this teenager calmly set down his shopping basket, take off his hat and glasses, and just charge at a wall. Hit it head on. He did this 2 more times. When he was done, his face was a bloody mess, and he put his hat and glasses back on and just left. Ugh, that would be horrible to watch. It's almost like he's been possessed to just run into this wall head first. Creepy stuff. Was a security coordinator for a large electric company and had access to like 80+ facilities' CCTV infrastructures. Was doing maintenance check on some random train station at like 3 a.m. Panned a camera as far to the right as possible to check that it was functioning. And this dude was on all fours eating a deer in the middle of the tracks. Watched him for like 10 minutes and went to get the other guy on shift. When I came back, the dude was gone. Rewound it and the dude stopped munching on the carcass, wiped the gore off his face and walked into the woods like he didn't have a care in the world. Thank you all for the gold and silver. Read all the comments most asked questions and answers that I noticed. Where did this happen? Iowa. Why did you just stand there like a dumb frick? Was late at night in middle of a long shift. Also really didn't want to process what the frick was happening. Kind of forgot I had someone else in the office that could come over and see what was going on. What was he wearing? Was kinda hard to tell, as the CCTV was basically filming at the end of its effective view. Looked like he was wearing some kind of heavy outerwear, like something you'd work outside in the winter with. It was late fall, so nights would dip into the 30s. Pics or it didn't happen. Part of the job was a very restrictive NDA, as in you can't bring any sort of recording out of the facility. I wasn't even allowed to bring a notepad with my nightly notes out of the office. Plus, this was before most people had decent cameras on their phones. We were still using film cameras to do most documentation. Mostly lots of people doing it. I've had to turn on the microphone and tell them to stop it or they'll be thrown out of the college gym. Doing it in the college gym, geez, you lot are brave. Do you know what I mean? Like, nothing like this happened at my school, and I went to a public I used to work loss prevention for a big box store. We had a lady get arrested for public indecency, and I was asked to investigate. I had to follow her backwards from the point of arrest, and it was a trip, to say the least. She arrived at the store swerving and nearly hitting several cars. She entered the store with 2 young children, both of whom are mentally handicapped. That lady literally dragged those kids around the store, slapping them and tugging at their ears/collars if they didn't obey. At some point, she just abandons them in the clothing section, walks through the back doors to the break area, and I'm assuming she thought it was the bathroom because she proceeds to pull down her pants and poops all over the fire exit door. She pulls her pants up without wiping, mind you, and goes back to the floor like nothing happened. Someone saw what she did and followed her. Luckily, there's an officer in the store at the time and quickly approaches her when the associate tells him what she did. Needless to say, she was definitely high and drunk and was arrested. The scary part is she did not mention those kids, not one time. It wasn't until I reviewed the tape that I saw they were just still waiting by the shopping cart, completely oblivious and afraid to move. Child services were later called, and I still think about those kids often. Breaks my heart to think about the bullcrap those kids must be going through. Not for a living, but I've had security cameras for the last 10 years at my house. A guy was shot 7 times in front of my house, but I only caught the audio. I've had random people walk around the front of the house looking for anything to steal, and actually stealing poo several times. Countless instances where people come up to break into my car until they realise the motion light kicks on, and we have cameras. Most of the time, people breaking into cars have a large tool bag over their shoulder. It's so amazing about the number of times people come up to my house doing weird crap. If I didn't have the cameras, I wouldn't know about hardly any of this stuff. One pro tip for anyone installing cameras: make sure you put lots of signs saying that there's a video surveillance. Otherwise, you just end up a lot of footage of people stealing stuff. Wow, this is really making me want to get a camera and put it outside my house. I live in a block of flats in central London. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm going to see some crazy stuff. So I might have to do this. I'll let you all know what I see, or if I do see anything, a comment. Not security cameras per se, but I had an SOC type job monitoring corporate internet usage. We had an image inspector watching people's web traffic, and it would throw up questionable images that someone on the network downloaded onto the big SOC screen. Being a medical related company, there were a lot of breast cancer type traffic that would throw off the corn detector, which is why we watched in realish time. One time, I was sitting at the desk overnight. Nobody should have been working, and suddenly the SOC screen turned into a wall of graphic child corn. Some genius took his laptop home, VPN'd into work, and started browsing so as to avoid being caught by his ISP. He's in prison now. This incident is a large part of why I no longer do that kind of work, or corporate forensics. They make it sound like it's all catching hackers and espionage, but in reality, it's looking at other people's corn. I used to do asset protection for a Walmart in a very heroin-addicted area. The creepiest thing was seeing how fast someone would go from completely normal to absolutely out of it in the span of a year because of the drug. You could build a timeline of their demise through CCTV pictures and videos. One man in particular really stood out to me. The first time I apprehended him, he was very polite and intelligent, just stealing to get his fix. A year later, and the 4th time I caught him, he was basically a shell of a man. He tried running from me, and I looked him right in the eyes and said, "I know you. Gary, last name. Please don't run." The look on his face of someone knowing him who he couldn't even remember will always stay with me. I used to do IT support for a company that had a lot of heavy machinery moving around inside a big warehouse type area. This giant front-end loader would scoop up material and dump it into a hopper. Along the sides of the floor were these huge concrete barriers. I've heard them called Jersey barriers and mafia blocks, but they're about 10 feet tall. And this one guy's life was ended when the front-end loader inadvertently scooped the base of the barrier and landed on one of 2 guys walking shoulder to shoulder through the plant. I was tasked to review the footage, then make copies, 6 of them to be exact, and then ensure that the footage worked and was self-executable and able to be run from a USB stick. So I had to watch the footage of this guy get killed over and over again a dozen times. I too was offered counselling for just watching the video. I was working at a pub in Sydney and watching the CCTV when I saw a guy continually cross and uncross his legs while playing a poker/slot machine. After a few minutes, he walked to a corner of the room, took a poo, and proceeded to go back to playing his machine. Talk about being addicted. Holy poo, this blew up. To answer some of your questions, this kind of thing is not rare. Mostly it's people peeing themselves. These machines are evil and designed to get people addicted, and that results in some people not being able to pull themselves away, even to use a bathroom. Finally, thank goodness I'm a manager, but telling someone it was their job sucked. Not a job, but my significant other and I have the Owlet monitor for our infant looking at his crib and room. It's set up like CCTV and it's creepy to begin with. I wake up at 2 a.m. and I go and check on him and then go back to bed. Once in bed, I get on my phone to view the monitor just for reassurance, and I see 2 light dots like eyes in night vision in the window of his room. I first poo my pants, and I go in the room to check everything out. I can't see anything, so I turn on the monitor again and don't see the dots anymore, so I think it could be a dog or something. I go back to bed and wake up again an hour later to check the monitor, and the dots were fricking there again. So I grab a pistol and go outside around his room and check the spot by the window, really ready to have to pull the trigger. Adrenaline is on full blast. I don't find or see anything, but the monkey grass has been mashed down by that window like something sat there for a while. I set up a sleeping bag in my son's room after that for a couple nights, and I checked the monitor so I could see what the night vision caught, but I never saw those lights again. I'm super thankful it was just that, but I was scared. I'm usually skeptical about stuff like this. I considered lights and stuff, and I hope it was an animal, not a person. Freaking messed up person. But my son is now 6 months. This happened when he was 4 months old, and the camera's been there since we brought him home. The whole time it's been up, I've never seen that, and I don't live by traffic lights and no street lamps on that side of the house. I seriously almost lost bladder control when I saw them again at the same spot just an hour later. But when I was in his room and looked at my phone, I just saw me and him and a black window. It freaked me out so much, I prepared to defend my family, but he's 6 months now and I've never seen it again. So hopefully just an animal. I used to work IT at a university, and last Easter we had a break-in. We found the footage of the guy going in at 2 p.m, leaving at around 3 and not really taking anything. Fast forward to 7 p.m, and the guy comes back in and is walking around the auditorium until 6 a.m. the next morning. In that time, he proceeded to strip into his underwear, steal and wear a mask the Japanese exchange students made for the teacher, and smoke a poo ton. He managed to steal 6 full bags of random items. We've dubbed him as the Jack-Off Bandit. Not for a living, but we had security cameras installed on the property whilst we were living in South Africa. We had a monitor set up next to the bed so we could see what was happening on the 4 cameras, without having to get up out of bed. One night, we heard something, so we turn on the monitor and see nothing unusual. I'm ready to go back to sleep, but my partner thinks something is off about one of the cameras. Does this camera look like it's pointing in a different direction slightly? She asks. No, same as always. And it's back to bed for me. She isn't convinced, so she starts watching the recordings. True enough, footage of some dude prowling around on the property, and the camera catches him adjusting. The terrifying bit, the way his face looked beneath the balaclava. Murder mask is what my significant other called. Okay, I literally just had to go and turn my light on because I'm so scared right now and I'm here on my own. Why did it have to get scary? When I worked as a security officer, it was my first week on the job. I watched my boss and another officer try to talk a guy off the top of our parking structure. Didn't work. Watched him jump off and land next to an employee who was coming in for her shift. Guy hit the ground so hard, it exploded the belt right off his pants. I will never forget watching. I reviewed the security cameras around my office building. The cameras only monitor the outside of the building. We have signs posted everywhere stating cameras are watching. You get accustomed to certain movement patterns and activation of cameras, so I don't have to review the whole day's activity, just the parts that show things out of the ordinary. For a while, homeless people were using an R behind landscaping to kick back and smoke drugs. Marijuana, heroin off foil, glass meth pipes, you name it. It's all in full view of one of the cameras. Watched a few drug sales there too. However, the most disturbing by far was the doing it. Basically, guys would take the homeless women to that area and do any number of weird and wonderful things. The weirdest of all was when some dude lay on the ground and a drug-slinging / homeless woman sat on a bench looking at her phone. He slipped off her flip-flop and started sucking off her toes. He took short breaks intermittently to hit a glass meth pipe, then went back to work on the toes. This went on for about 45 minutes. Then they left. We systematically found almost all the homeless corn stars during the day and told them our place has cameras and not to come back. Things have been quiet for a few years. My time to shine. My first job out of college was working for a big-ass security company. Think worldwide big. I was doing electrical engineering and security system design for them. One of the first assignments I had was assisting in writing a report about a security system for a nuclear storage facility we had designed that had been infiltrated by nuns. No joke. Basically, the facility got invaded by octogenarian nuns who started covering the nuclear storage facility in blood they had conveniently provided in water bottles. The footage was jarring in quite a few ways. So many of these will give me nightmares, so I'll throw one in the mix that I never want to forget. A year back, I was working at a hostel, and we have security cameras throughout the building. Watching the footage from the camera in the kitchen, it's about 2 a.m, and a very drunk guest walks in, grabs some snacks, and accidentally drops an empty bottle on the ground. He then proceeds to kick it up into the air, then kick it again in the air, where it flies across the entire length of the room, perfectly into the recycling bin. In his drunken state, he threw up in his hands, ran around in a circle, clearly in shock at how amazing he is. Then after, looking around, he noticed there was no one there to see it. After that, he looked visibly depressed and stumbled back out of the kitchen. I would probably say that's our most normal one right now, wouldn't you? Just some guy being sick in his hands. Like, I wouldn't mind watching that on CCTV, compared to all this other stuff. Working in a rehearsal studio for bands, we had cameras at the front desk that pointed down the hall with the entrances to all the rooms. One day, I'm sitting there minding my own business and noticed there was a girl sitting in the hallway outside one of the studios. She'd come in with one of the bands that was practicing, and I just assumed she didn't feel like sitting in the loud space with the band. So I got up and went to tell her she was welcome to sit in the lobby, where there was a couch and TV. I got around the corner and she wasn't there. I went back to the desk and there she was, sitting in the hallway waiting outside the room. So I went back out to find her, not there, again. I assumed she'd gone into the room, so I went and knocked and they informed me that the girl had left a while before, just after they'd gotten started practicing. So I went back and there she was, still on camera. It was only then that I realised I'd accidentally bumped the freeze frame button for the monitor. Ugh, boring. I thought she was a ghost. I was like, you're literally staring at a ghost, that's mad. And then it turned out to be really boring. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos coming daily.